Hello, welcome back. My name is Bradley Naragon. I'm here today because I have some of you who follow my Instagram, Naragon Astrology. You may have noticed I've been posting charts about Ukraine and Zelensky and Putin, making some commentary. And um, basically, I think at one point I saw a transit that Zelensky was having, and I made some offhanded comment that I hadn't really thought about that much, and I thought, boy, maybe Russia isn't using astrologers. Uh, and then, of course, I mean, besides the massive difference in size of armies and the reality of it, and the fact that this has been being planned down to the detail for a long, long time, uh, I started looking further into a lot of the charts and found some pretty interesting things, which is why I'm here today. I wanted to share with you some of the findings on some of the critical Zodiac points that I found that relate to Ukraine. So I'm gonna switch modes here and share my screen. And here we are. So, whoops, this is way more than I wanted to show you off the bat. This first chart right here is the chart for the Ukraine. This is the chart time that's in the Astro data bank. It has a Rodin rating of AA. So a couple things I want to draw your attention to. Obviously, this is approaching a full moon on this chart here. There's so much history and backstory to the nation, the region, and a lot that's gone on. So I've been studying and reading some. It's a lot, so I'm not going to get into a lot. Like I said, I'm just going to highlight a couple points that really jumped out to me to watch, and also correlate with some of the things that we're already witnessing going on. So in this chart, the moon in opposition to all that Leo and applying to oppose the sun is key. And when we start looking at these other charts, you're going to see that this degree is really significant for Ukraine, as is this early degree of Aquarius here that you find the Saturn in. The other thing in this chart that's really jumps out too is this Pluto square to the Aquarius Leo axes. I mean, there's a lot going on, but those are the things I wanted to at least draw your attention to on this one. And now, this chart here is January 22nd, 1918, where Ukraine proclaimed independence. And I thought this was really fascinating because what we see here is there's the sun at 1 degree, 35 minutes Aquarius, right on that Saturn. This re-emphasizes that early Aquarius degree for us. And then Uranus at 22-27 Aquarius, right on that moon in the chart. So that's why I drew your attention there to begin with. These degrees got highlighted a couple times there. Now, and that there's so much more, but like I said, I'm keeping this pretty brief. And the next chart I wanted to add to this is I'm going to put Zelensky's chart on here and just draw a little attention to his Venus Sun at 5 Aquarius. It's not right in line with that, but it's pretty close. And he's got that Leo moon at 17 Leo. That's in a square to Pluto, and his Uranus is on that Pluto for the nation's chart. 17 degrees of the cardinal signs is pretty highlighted too, because as we know, when this started, and then drop back here, this chart is pretty intense. When it started, there's Saturn at 18 Aquarius. So Saturn by transit's playing a pretty significant role in this war and what's happening. I'm going to jump back to the Ukraine chart and bring in current transits. And one of the things that I was looking at was this transiting Pluto, which was really highlighted in the start chart, as you just saw. That Pluto is actually, see right now it's at 27 Capricorn in 57 minutes. That is applying to an almost exact inconjunct to the Venus in this chart. And if you read about that transit, Pluto inconjunct Venus, I was reading about it, and it's actually literally talking about you may have to leave your family and loved ones and travel afar. So I was like, wow, that actually correlates to the refugee crisis and what's happening right now. I was kind of surprised to read that and see that, so I thought I'd share that. The other thing that I'm really paying attention to is, like I said, that Saturn transit, because it's highlighted in multiple charts. Just going to throw one more chart at you here to emphasize this is, here we go. This chart here, I'm going to move it in position number 1 and just show the chart by itself for a second. This was actually the day, December 25th, 1991, where the Soviet Union flag was lowered at the Kremlin. So Gorbachev, you did it, and it dissolved, and it's a very symbolic day. Again, we've got, Saturn, of course, is still early Aquarius there. But I wanted to point out, this is a specific time. They gave an exact time of this event. And here we have that 23 Aquarius on the descendant. So we've got a very significant repeating theme there. And of course, that's one thing that we're watching. And so if we jump back to the Ukraine chart and we go back to transits right now around it, you can see that today, the day of the third talks, we had the Venus-Mars conjunction on that Saturn, and then the transiting Saturn is moving up onto that moon. So if we move forward, we can see that we are looking at Saturn reaching that degree, almost there, and then there's Venus joining the party. There's Mars coming up on it. Juno's at 22. So we have a huge activation of the moon. And if you remember, this is also that Uranus degree in the 1918 chart. So there, when we come to, I have to move my little picture, April 4th, we actually have Mars and Saturn in conjunction on the moon. So, at the very least, obviously this is a really critical day. Now, if you look, there's the transiting nodes at 22 Taurus, Scorpio. So we also have that Mars-Saturn conjunctions come into an exact square to the nodes, along with the moon in the chart. That's just a few points I wanted to share with you today. And it turns out that I have a guest in the studio with me. Are you ready for this? Let me move over. Welcome to the set. This is astrologer Greg Crawford. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, hey, Bradley, didn't see you there. Nice to,
yeah.
nice happen chance. What are you looking at here?
This is, thank you. We've got some pretty intense stuff that we're looking at, and like I was just telling everybody, this is the chart of Ukraine from the August 24th, 1991 chart, in the center. And then these are these April 4th transits coming up, which is a day that I thought was pretty highlighted in terms of, the question is like, when is this going to shift and change, and in what way? And basically explaining how that Saturn at the start of the whole thing, if we go back in time, we can see that, oops, I went too fast. We can see that Saturn, I believe it's February 24th, at the start. There we are. There's that Saturn square that Pluto. So what do you think, Gray, on all of this? Do you have any other thoughts or insights?
Well, the Saturn Mars on the moon definitely looks really brutal that you were just showing. And seeing the 23 Aquarius, that would be significant anyway, because that's where Saturn's never going to get too far from that. It goes up past 23 Aquarius, but that's around the place it's going to eventually station retrograde. So Saturn will be on the Ukraine moon for months.
Okay.
But yeah, the Saturn Mars cycle is one of the more important cycles in astrology, and it has a very long history. So, traditionally, that's a cycle that people have used in mundane astrology for, centuries. And yeah, it's really eerie to see that it's right there on the moon. And I mean, right now we don't know. I mean, we know there's already a refugee crisis. We don't know yet the extent Putin and Russia are gonna, like how far they're gonna be willing to take this. But that's certainly concerning. The moon is the people. So that's like the people of Ukraine with that Mars Saturn right on it, which, in some types of astrology, we can reframe Mars Saturn, but in this case, in this context, that's, like I said, a pretty brutal combination. So that's definitely really concerning. It's interesting that the Venus is opposite the Venus. And I remember you pointing out, I think it's one of those other charts. Is it the original Ukraine chart that it's Venus retrograde in Aquarius at that same degree, basically?
Was that? Oh my gosh.
I think it was the original Ukraine. You could put like the third one, maybe on third wheel on.
Oh, right. Thank you.
I think it was the 1918 chart.
Let's see. There's Zelensky on the outside. He does not have late Aquarius. Okay. Let's pull up that. Is it this one? Oh, yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that's just kind of, and of course, that's the original independent Uranus right there.
Speaking of the moon, you had brought something up.
So they are actually a Venus-Uranus original independence. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah, just a Venus-Uranus conjunction in Aquarius.
Yeah, I mean, Venus retrograde with Uranus.
The spirit of that.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like, I mean, Uranus being there isn't necessarily a good sign, I guess, related to all this, but yeah, it's just amazing that I was trying to think if there was some way to, it's hard to know, like predicting based upon this stuff, except like you're saying, it's obviously a really sensitive degree, and Saturn's just going to be there for a long time.
Well, thinking about how the moon is so highlighted now, you had mentioned something earlier about the progressed Ukraine chart. Should we look at that?
Sure. Yeah, if you look at the Ukraine chart, the 91 Ukraine chart, what's pretty, I have a Patreon for people that support my astrology writing, and we do like a monthly meeting. And at the last meeting we had like last week, one of the people that were in the group, Sarah Buckingham, was asking me about the Ukraine chart, and I was pulling it up, and she had heard there was something going on with this Ukraine secondary progress chart, which didn't turn out to be, whoever told her that, I think had the wrong thing. But what we saw was, what was kind of amazing was this, that in December of 2021 there was a progressed full moon progressing that Ukraine chart. And so, at a full moon, things really come to a head. There's a big buildup, right? But what's really pretty incredible about this full moon is just that it's on the cardinal axis. So the Ukraine progressed sun is 0 Libra. The full moon was at 0 Aries. The cardinal axis is you know like probably the most active point for world events. It's the intersection of 0 Aries and 0 Libra, the intersection of the equator of the Earth, which is like this, the Earth's energetic sort of plane just going out into space. It's where it crosses the sun's path, the ecliptic, which is our zodiac. So it's like the nodes of the sun or the nodes of the Earth-Sun relationship. And so for that, just beyond that, yeah, there's something about this where Ukraine was just really being set off here by the secondary progressed chart, that just sort of goes with then this major shattering, event happening not too long after this.
Now that we're looking at this chart, Gray, I did not see this before, but look at that progressed Venus down at 23 Leo.
Yeah, exactly, right there.
Now that's going to get hit by that opposition from Saturn. So again, I mean, we've seen that axis highlighted in almost all the charts.
Yep. And that was also the ascendant, I believe, of the lowering of the Kremlin flag. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so that's definitely a pivotal degree relating to all this. And because Saturn's going to be there for so long, it does make me wonder about this being a prolonged combat. And certainly, even if the actual bombing doesn't go on for months, the aftershocks, the refugee crisis, just the impact on the Ukrainian people will be obviously prolonged and be playing out for a long time.
For some of the astrological activity that's a little further out than just in the next month or so, you had seen. You got
something else. Sorry.
Go for it.
Just by secondary progression. When I thought it had been interesting, and you had that up earlier, just that Ukraine has Ceres and Scorpio with Pluto and Scorpio. So I'm just noticing by secondary progressions, there is Ceres with Pluto. And this is definitely, being like Putin gets connected with Pluto a lot. I mean, the chart people like to use for Putin, which is very possibly not true and not accurate, but the one that people like to use has like a Leo midheaven, right? With like Pluto there. I think it's actually around 20 something Leo, right? I think it is.
It's like a Pluto South Node conjunction in the 10th.
And maybe there is a node there too.
Gemini moon in the 8th.
But
Scorpio rising.
He's definitely, people associate him with Pluto a lot in terms of like this person obsessed with power who won't let go of his power. And obviously Ceres and her mythology of losing her daughter to the underworld. Yeah, and just the grief of all. Yeah, just that's really striking that Ceres would be right there with Pluto in the progression right now.
And also now that we're looking at this, I mean, obviously Eris is forming a pretty tight inconjunct to that Pluto there, just in the nations chart, and obviously the formation of it in 91 came with the backdrop of a lot of other forces already at play. There was a coup d'etat right before this in August of 91. It was a last-ditch effort to regain power and control over Soviet empire that didn't work out. But obviously, people who wanted everybody to come back under one rule are still around. Like the foreshadowing of the start it's, and then even just the 1918 chart, I mean, that morphed into the joining of the Soviet Union in 1922. So yeah. There was one other thing that we saw that it's a bit farther out, but it's really significant in terms of an activation for these charts. So while we don't
yeah.
know what it would be necessarily, I mean, at this point, I don't really know what to
At the
predict
end
with
of
these things,
end of
except
July, you mean?
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I, oh, we're almost there. There, if you look down in Taurus, you can see that we've got that North Node, Mars Uranus conjunction. Saturn is going retrograde, and it's just gone back over the moon because it moved up. I think it's stationed at 25 Aquarius. So this is kind of like the official second pass over the moon for Saturn at this time, which I would say that the April 4th pass of Saturn on the moon is going to coincide then with the second pass, you know. Obviously, we don't know how this is all going to play out, but what do you think about this whole lineup with the opposition to Pluto and South Node?
Yeah, I mean, I've been wondering about that just in general, and once I saw that Ukraine chart and Pluto being there at 18 Scorpio, yeah, the fact that the Mars Uranus North Node conjunction, which, you know, we could see going in different ways. Sure, it could go in some really major breakthrough, innovative types of events and experiences, in positive, like innovative ways, but that can also just be sort of like chaos unleashed, you know. And yeah, I mean, relative to this, it definitely makes me wonder. Can't say there's anything positive to say regarding positive outcomes with that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that things are gonna it's hard to know. This really, obviously, setting off this Ukraine chart, I mean, it'll be interesting, I guess, as far as interesting can be applied when tracking, you know, traumatic world events in association with astrology, I guess, to see just like how much this Ukraine chart does show up with things. Because if this Ukraine chart really does work, which it seems like it does with how we're noticing, you know, the 1 Aquarius Saturn and the 23 Aquarius moon, we would think something's going on here. I mean, also just that Mercury is even going in Leo over at those other points, like the Venus retrograde, the Jupiter. Of course, they're also they're in a Saturn return of the nation too, with Saturn on the moon. I mean, that would be, if we were just thinking about this being a person, this would be, you could expect there's some difficult things they'd be going through related to that. But yeah, with it squaring the nodes too. I mean, the other thing would be the fact that you point out that other chart, was it around April 4th that Mars and Saturn are conjoining on the moon. So it's very significant. There's some key there where, you know, they're conjoining the moon. Then by the beginning of August, Mars has moved down to be with Uranus opposite to Pluto. I guess what it makes me think for sure is whatever happens around early April is really critical for how things will play out past that point.
There's one thing else I had that Let me drop down to one chart here. Let's get, there you are. I was looking at Zelensky's chart, and obviously he just had the Saturn oppose the moon, square the Uranus. Saturn in trine to Pluto is probably like one of his most positive transits for dealing with the situation at hand. That's a good strengthening transit. The thing that I noticed in this chart was that maybe other people wouldn't be noticing, that who don't use planetary nodes, is that that Neptune in this chart is actually conjunct south nodes of Mars and Uranus. So that's in a way, it's a little triple conjunction there. And I thought that was really interesting in sense of, from the evolutionary astrology perspective, when we look at where Neptune is in the chart by house, we're going to come at it with the question of what holds ultimate meaning in consciousness for this individual. So having that Neptune in the 6th house, being of service to, in this case, the nation, holds great meaning in his consciousness, which I think is a big part of why he's been very, like, Aquarius, authentic, genuine leader. So has been inspired a lot of people in Ukraine and around the world by his actions. And of course, the Venus conjunct the Sun here is ruler of that Pluto North Node conjunction in the 5th. It's like we don't know how long he's even going to be on the planet at this point, but I would definitely say that he is full on living his soul purpose in what he's doing there. And having that Neptune conjunct the south nodes of Mars and Uranus, when we put Mars Uranus together, one of the things I think of right away is fighting for freedom. So that's something that's interesting in that other chart when we move forward to the end of July.
Plus, it makes me think of him having been an actor, I guess, comedian, and part of what he's doing is there's something about his personality that is able to, sort of in a Neptune way, like, I would say he's being, when you're talking about his soul purpose, I would say that that's coming out here right now. I mean, it's a great actually example of Neptune in the 6th house. It's gonna be tricky. I mean, like, I myself am Gemini rising, pretty close to his. And I also have Neptune and Sagittarius in my 6th house. And it's something I've often thought about, like, how do you, in what ways can this really come out in this deeper level? And just, this is one for sure, like really rising to the challenge of a crisis, using being able to embody Neptune in a way. In this case, I'm thinking of it more as a way to unify people, bring people together, using his voice, like drawing attention, challenging other world leaders. I mean, you would hope in any situation Ukraine would have become a big center of focus, but it seems like his personality and his ability to really communicate and be present in a crisis and sort of be like he's really speaking for the people. And I saw some articles comparing him in a way to the way that Winston Churchill was able to do that for England at times, like for some people, being this rallying kind of voice. That definitely seems like something he's doing right now.
Looks like March 11th and 12th will be significant days for Zelensky, with that Venus-Mars conjunction coming right up on there.
And of course, yeah, his midheaven is at 20 Aquarius point we keep talking about.
Thank you.
And
yes.
So Saturn's on his midheaven, as this is definitely, like one hell of a Saturn to the midheaven transit. Probably one of the more extreme examples that we can can think of. And Saturn's not really, like we've mentioned before, Saturn's not really going anywhere. Will be interesting here at the end of March, around March 28th, 27th, 28th, around the 29th, Venus starts separating from Saturn. It will be, I mean, there is a lot of economic, in a way of like kind of Venus, like a lot of things are being used by other countries to kind of try to give Russia all these consequences of like taking things away from them or taking away their access to things. And I don't know if for some reason, I mean, of course, Venus gets there first, and then as we looked at another chart, but here comes Mars right behind. So it will be interesting to see what happens with like Venus and Saturn coming there for him, and then Venus moves on, and then Mars passes over that midheaven also, like around April 4th, I think.
And bringing up resources in the global economy and world that we live in today, we've known that when the lunar nodes went into Taurus Scorpio, that resources would come up even stronger as an issue, and money and finances. So as everything does relate, that right now changing economy globally with this war, this is pretty significant with this square, this massive square to that nodal axis coming up end of March, beginning of April.
Yeah.
There's a lot, I think there's a lot right now, there's just obviously a lot of unknown where things are gonna land or end. This is one of those points early April where, you know, like that might come into more focus, the actual karma and the result of in the short term of how this will play out.
It does make me feel like there's something about that square of the nodes that does speak on some level to different countries getting united. But there's really being at the bendings at the square, and this would be the southern bending of the nodes, especially if the moon actually went through there. The moon would be at, when the moon goes through that point that month, it'll be at its own southern bending. Or in evolutionary astrology, it would be spoken of as the south, like the southern bending. The south node is the resolution piece, right, of that nodal square. But just that the decisions that are made have enormous consequences. And it's one of those things where, you know, how long is it, how far is Russia going to take this, and how long is it okay for everyone to sit back watching it happen and just doing economic things, and, you know, where does it go from there, sort of thing. Yeah, there's lots of tension there on the nodes.
I mean, obviously before this, he started with the Taurus Scorpio nodes. I mean, resource issues are clearly on the forefront all over the place, and here in the United States with the Pluto return, it's really obvious the increasing level of social polarization, chaos, and you know, how many people are you know, barely living paycheck to paycheck, are not at all at this point. It's staggering and it's heartbreaking, and then to see the inflation and basically it's like the costs of all of this always just comes back to the people. Doesn't seem right. So that's, you know.
And it's interesting, you stopped it right here at I didn't do that on purpose, that it's the new moon in Aries that is with Chiron. I mean, that new moon is like right on Chiron, with Mercury about to go into the heart of the sun with Chiron. And Pallas Athena is there too.
Yeah, that's quite a new moon.
Which actually I want to say something about, but I was going to say what you're talking about with resources. I mean, yeah, now we have this whole refugee crisis that we don't even know the extent of. You know, we're only, what, 12 days into this right now as we're talking. And I think did we see something? They said there's already 1.4 million,
Over 1.5 million
over one and a
people.
half million refugees. And just in the United States, like we're speaking in, well, I guess right now we're in Centralia, but Olympia, we're this area that we're in, you know, and I'm sure it's like that many other places. There's already a huge, just massive homeless population as it is. And people are very much struggling. And so this does, just this big event is just creating this even bigger refugee crisis. It's going to create lots of global economic impacts.
Mhm.
It's yeah, it's definitely very, like you were saying, with the Uranus Taurus North Node thing, and resources and stuff. It's definitely activating all that. I guess that makes me think too here, maybe with this new moon in Aries, I'm just thinking Chiron. Obviously, this is a return to some of those the chironic, wounding around warfare and everything that goes with that. I'm just thinking that Pallas Athena, just how strategic she is. She guides people to victory. It's kind of interesting. She's sort of in a sextile relationship with all the Aquarius. I don't know. I'm just wondering about that. Just being there too. I don't have too much to say about it, but that's definitely interesting that she's in there with that stuff.
Just going a little further on what you were saying about in evolutionary astrology, we say square to the nodes, and so like one of the really simple ways to find the resolution node is if you stand on the planets that are squaring the nodes, and you look at the center of the chart, you go to the node to the left, which is what Grace said in a much more eloquent, technical fashion. So then the south node is the resolution node. So how people would normally look at a chart, they say, you're coming from that south node and you head towards that north node. And as evolutionary astrologers with this type of signature, we're actually saying, well, you're still going to want to do the Taurus north node, which, Taurus does correlate at its root survival, resources, self-sufficiency, self-reliance, self-sustainability, all that Taurian energy. But then relative to this square to the nodes, you're going to want to integrate it back into the south node. And when we go to a Scorpio south node, we're stronger together. And Gray, you kind of mentioned like there's a lot of ways. I mean, on the mundane level, this isn't a time where people are going to be maybe able to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. They're going to have to merge resources, whether that's housing or whatever you want to look at it. Like we have to pool what we have at this during this time. It suggests that, but it also suggests a lot of these bigger economic moves that we may be seeing as people globally try to shuffle and adjust to what's happening in the global marketplace. Like we might see some big mergers. We might see, it kind of raises that question of which nations are going to come together to be stronger together and which won't, and what's going to be the fallout and impact of that for just the people, the everyday people. So
yeah, it also makes me, I was thinking already about just the massive accumulated grief and how difficult a time people have had for so long. And a lot of people, even without a war breaking out, were already kind of at a breaking point, I think, mentally, just mental exhaustion, just anxieties and things, which can also be about resources, but there's also just the pandemic just, continuing for so long at this point as we were coming into this. And like there was already a lot of grief and, this sort of like scorpionic, how do you sort of transmute and work with that already? And yeah, just like makes me think also just like then war breaking out just amplifies that even more than it already was.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you
You
for
surprised me. I don't even know when you came in.
yeah.
Uh,
I hope that wasn't too
it's
surprising.
a little awkward.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Before we go, you had said something. Can you just give us a little something about you're doing a class on Antiscia
Oh,
and Contra Antiscia? Can you let us know what that when
yeah.
that is and what that even is?
Wow.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, describe what Antiscia. So yes, I am teaching a course with Kate Petty, who's an astrologer. He lives in the Seattle area, who I've been friends with for over 8 years now. She's a real expert on Antiscia and Contra Antiscia. It's been something she's really specialized in for about 12 years. She's actually the person that got me interested in it. And I feel like I was sort of in the right place at the right time of hanging out with her and just brainstorming around ideas about it. And we started getting going with some ideas. We're like, oh, we should, this could be turned into like easily a class or book or whatever. And so we just came up with the idea to teach a course on it together. So it's going to begin on April 21st, and there's going to be 6 classes on Thursday nights in Pacific time. You can go to my website, which is Gray, Gray, Crawford, CRAWFORD.net. And there's some information on it there. Antiscia and Contra Antiscia are ways that planets and signs come together in relationship and make connections that make really important statements in your own natal chart. It's going to also come up in synastry. It also comes up in transits. And in fact, a great example is, again, a great example of using a terrible thing is this Ukraine war. Saturn and Uranus were no longer in an exact square, but when the war started, they were in an exact Contra Antiscia. And so what happens in a Contra Antiscia, I think so Saturn was about 18 Aquarius roughly, and Uranus was roughly 12 Taurus. If you take the midpoint of 18 Aquarius and 12 Taurus, it's going to end up on the cardinal axis, 0 Aries, 0 Libra. So Contra Antiscia are points forming midpoints on the Aries, Libra, on the equinox points. Antiscia form midpoints on the solstices, and the Antiscia signs, they're equal light, so they have like a shared power. Contra Antiscia signs are sort of a sacred marriage of opposing light. They have opposing contrasting qualities, like there's nothing in common between Taurus and Aquarius, but they're equal ascension rising times, so they actually do share quality of time. And this probably sounds very technical, but it's like actually interesting concept that creates relationships. Relationships that really have an impact and are really just as important as a square, conjunction, sextile, trine, the major aspects you're normally aware of. And it sounds very technical, but since we have time in this course, we're going to approach it in a way that'll make it easy for people to understand who are not familiar with it. And we're going to bring in some mythology and other ways to make it yeah. So thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, there'll be a link to graycrawford.net in the description, so if you wanted to check out the details on that, you can go there.
Oh yeah, you could probably put a link to that course too, so then they could click on it if they want.
All right, I will do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, until next time, take care.